Images from better days come to mind. Moments when Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin shook hands in Alaska, presenting to the world the image of two leaders united by a peculiar, if controversial, rapport. Back then, there seemed to be no daylight between them. For critics, it was troubling proof of Trump's softness toward Moscow. For supporters, it was pragmatic diplomacy that kept relations steady. But those days are now history. At the United Nations General Assembly in New York, Trump stunned his audience by mocking Moscow and labeling Russia a paper tiger. For many, this marked the most dramatic break in his years-long approach to Russia. The words carried more than symbolism. They represented a public dismissal of Russia's battlefield strength and at the same time a surprising expression of faith that Ukraine could reclaim its territories. For Vladimir Putin, once the recipient of Trump's admiration, the shift was a jarring reminder that political friendships are fleeting. For Russian citizens, the reaction was a mix of disbelief, anger, and weary resignation. After all, Trump had been seen by some in Moscow as a leader who might temper America's support for Ukraine. Now, his tone was harsher than ever. The streets of Moscow revealed this tension. Outside the US embassy, ordinary people voiced their disappointment. Svetlana Vasilenko, a retiree, dismissed Trump's words as little more than theatre. In her eyes, Trump is an actor first and foremost, a man who thrives on drama and unpredictability. She described him as a performer who perhaps lacked sleep or perhaps was denied some unspoken desire. For Svetlana, Trump's remarks meant little because tomorrow she believed he could just as easily swing back in favor of Russia. This view reflects a certain generational cynicism in Russia, one that sees politics less as policy and more as spectacle. For many older Russians, Trump remains a wild card, capable of turning either way depending on the mood of the day. Yet among younger citizens, the sentiment is different. Stepan Lastochkin, a university student, expressed unshakable confidence in Russia's military might. Asked if Ukraine had any chance of victory, his response was firm: no chance. Absolutely no chance. In his mind, numbers and capabilities are on Russia's side. The belief is not built on diplomacy, but on the conviction that Russia's men at the front lines will ultimately decide the outcome. This contrast between Svetlana's skepticism and Stepan's certainty illustrates a broader divide in Russian society. The older generation, tempered by decades of political swings and disillusionment, views leaders like Trump as unpredictable actors on a stage. The younger generation, immersed in the patriotic narrative of strength, places its faith in the battlefield. Inside the Kremlin, however, there was no room for such ambiguity. Russia's leadership quickly dismissed Trump's remarks. Officials declared that Ukraine's full recapture of Russian-occupied territories was impossible. At a meeting of the Security Council chaired by Putin, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Intelligence Chief Sergei Narishkin reinforced the official line. Moscow remains unshaken, and Trump's words are just another fluctuation in the unpredictable tide of international politics. Trump's reversal is remarkable when set against his record. During his presidency from 2017 to 2021, he frequently praised Putin, often arguing that personal relationships with adversarial leaders could diffuse tensions and deliver peace. His rhetoric was peppered with admiration for Putin's strength and leadership. Those words won him criticism at home, where many accused him of undermining traditional alliances while elevating an adversary. But the United Nations speech marked a turning point. By branding Russia a paper tiger, Trump not only mocked Moscow, but also signaled to Kyiv that the United States might be more committed to its cause than ever before. For Ukraine, still fighting desperately on the front lines, Trump's words sounded like long-awaited validation. To global audiences, though, Trump's U-turn raised questions. Was this genuine conviction or another instance of his unpredictable style? Could such rhetoric translate into policy, or would it be another dramatic flourish destined to fade as quickly as it emerged? For Moscow, the stakes are higher. Russia has built much of its wartime narrative on portraying strength, inevitability, and endurance. To have a former ally dismiss it as weak threatens that narrative. Yet officials in the Kremlin remain outwardly unmoved, projecting calm while reiterating that Ukraine's victory is an illusion crafted by the West. The diplomatic fallout is complex. In Europe, Trump's words may encourage leaders to push for tougher sanctions and bolder military assistance. In Kyiv, they serve as morale boosters, proof that US support remains alive, even if inconsistent. For Washington, the shift places Trump in the unusual position of being more hawkish on Russia than in his earlier years. It also complicates his personal story with Putin. The handshake in Alaska once symbolized strategic closeness. Today, the speech at the UN symbolizes rupture. The irony is unmistakable. The very leader once accused of being too close to Russia now derides it as weak and ineffective. For citizens in Russia, this paradox fuels frustration. Svetlana's remark, "Tomorrow he'll be back on our side," captures the uncertainty of relying on Trump. Stepan's insistence that Russia will prevail reflects the opposite, a belief that the nation's strength lies not in foreign approval, but in its own resilience. Journalistically, the significance lies in how words shape perception. Trump's U-turn may not change the balance of power on the battlefield, but it reshapes the narrative of the war. By suggesting Ukraine could recapture its territories, he legitimizes the idea of Ukrainian victory on the world stage, even if military realities remain stubbornly complex. For Ukraine, this narrative shift matters. Every signal of support from Washington boosts confidence and pressures allies to maintain or expand assistance. For Russia, the narrative is a problem. It undermines years of messaging designed to portray the war as a struggle of inevitability. The long-term question is whether Trump's words will harden into policy or dissolve into yet another episode of his political theatre. In his career, Trump has often shifted positions rapidly, leaving allies and adversaries alike uncertain of his true intentions. Moscow knows this, which is why officials like Vasilenko dismiss his comments as temporary. Yet they cannot fully ignore them either, for words spoken at the United Nations reverberate far beyond the hall where they were delivered. This moment also raises questions about global power perception. If the US president calls Russia a paper tiger, does that embolden NATO allies? Does it weaken Moscow's diplomatic leverage in places like Beijing or Tehran? Or does it instead rally Russian resolve, encouraging the Kremlin to double down on military operations to prove Trump wrong? In many ways, Trump's reversal exemplifies the unpredictability of 21st century geopolitics. Alliances shift, rhetoric swings, and the line between theatre and policy blurs. Citizens like Svetlana and Stepan are left interpreting events through their own lenses, skepticism on one hand, defiance on the other. Meanwhile, leaders like Putin and Trump play their roles on the global stage, aware that every word can ripple through capitals, markets, and battlefields. The world has seen Trump change his tone before. The difference now is context: a grinding war in Ukraine, thousands of lives lost, and an international community on edge. His U-turn is not just about Trump and Putin. It is about how narratives influence morale, strategy, and the fragile balance between escalation and diplomacy. As the cameras close in on Trump at the UN, and as Putin sits at the Kremlin table surrounded by his closest advisors, one truth remains: words matter. They may not decide the outcome of wars, but they frame how those wars are understood, remembered, and contested. Trump's Russia U-turn may one day be remembered as a fleeting moment of rhetoric, or it may mark the beginning of a deeper fracture between Washington and Moscow. For now, the world is left watching, waiting, and questioning whether this was just another performance or the start of something real. And as Svetlana reminded us, tomorrow Trump might be back on their side. But today, in New York and Moscow alike, his words echo loudly, signaling that the unpredictable relationship between two powerful men, once so close, has taken yet another unexpected turn.